Let me paint you a picture. In 1914, a 31-year-old man named Ernest Shackleton nailed a handwritten notice to a board outside his London office. It read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." 5,000 men applied within days, not because they were reckless, not because they were suicidal, but because something in that notice struck a frequency so deep in the human chest that it bypassed reason entirely and spoke directly to something ancient, something primal, the part of us that was built not for comfort, but for the impossible. Shackleton never reached the South Pole. His ship, the Endurance, became trapped in pack ice 8 days before reaching land. It was crushed. It sank. His crew of 27 men were stranded on drifting ice in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, 800 miles from the nearest human settlement, with no radio contact, in temperatures that could kill an unprotected man in minutes. They survived, every single one of them, for 22 months. And the question that has occupied psychologists, historians, and military scientists ever since is not how. The logistics have been documented exhaustively. The question is, what kind of mind produces that? What happens inside a human brain that refuses to register the impossible as a fact? What is the internal architecture of a person who looks at a situation that should end them and chooses, consciously, deliberately, repeatedly, to continue? The Stoics had an answer. Not a motivational poster, not a 5-step framework. A philosophy forged over 6 centuries, tested in slavery and empire and war and exile, that understood something modern achievement culture still hasn't fully grasped. The ceiling of human possibility is not made of circumstance. It is made of cognition, and cognition can be trained. What you are about to encounter in this video are not 8 suggestions. They are 8 lessons, deep, ancient, and ruthlessly applicable, that govern what the human mind is actually capable of when it is trained correctly. These are not the lessons the self-help industry sells. These are the lessons the Stoics kept to themselves, the ones they practiced in private, in their journals, in their darkest hours, the ones that actually worked. Do not let this play in the background. The impossible has never been achieved by half attention. These ideas require the full weight of your concentration. Give them that, and what you receive in return will change the architecture of your mind permanently. Let's begin. Lesson 1. The sovereignty of the will. Why the only unbreakable thing in the universe is the choice you make inside your own mind. There is a word in ancient Greek that has no perfect English translation. The word is prohairesis. Epictetus used it more than any other term in his entire body of work. He was born a slave in Hierapolis, in what is now modern Turkey, around 50 AD. His master was a man named Epaphroditus, a freedman of the Emperor Nero, who reportedly, on one occasion, twisted Epictetus's leg for amusement, while Epictetus calmly warned him that the leg would break. It broke. Epictetus did not scream. He looked at his master and said, "Did I not tell you that it would break?" This story, whether literally true or not, captures something essential about prohairesis. It is usually translated as will or choice or moral purpose, but none of those translations are precise enough. Prohairesis is something more specific and more radical. It is the part of the human self that is entirely, completely, and without qualification free. Not free in the political sense, not free in the social sense, free in the deepest ontological sense, the sense that no external force, no master, no emperor, no circumstance, no pain, no deprivation can reach inside it and move it without your consent. Epictetus wrote, "Men are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions about things. Death is nothing dreadful, otherwise it would have seemed so to Socrates. But the opinion that death is dreadful, that is the dreadful thing." Now pause there. Because this is not a platitude, this is a claim about the structure of reality. Epictetus is saying that between every event and your experience of that event, there is a gap. And inside that gap lives proheresis, the sovereign, untouchable, always available to you faculty of choice. Modern neuroscience has mapped this gap with extraordinary precision. Viktor Frankl, who arrived at nearly identical conclusions to Epictetus after surviving 4 Nazi concentration camps, described it as the last of human freedoms. In 2021, researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences published findings showing that conscious deliberation, what they called volitional action, produces measurable changes in prefrontal cortex activation that are entirely independent of environmental stimuli. Your brain has a physical mechanism for exercising the very sovereignty Epictetus described. It is not metaphor, it is anatomy. But here is where this law becomes practical, and where it separates the people who achieve impossible things from everyone else. Most people experience difficulty as something that happens to them. The job falls through, the relationship ends, the diagnosis arrives, and the mind, untrained, treats these events as facts about the self, evidence of inadequacy, proof of limitation, confirmation that the ceiling is real. The trained mind, the Stoic mind, experiences difficulty as raw material, not because it pretends the difficulty isn't real, but because it has internalized, at the level of reflex, the distinction between the event and the interpretation, between what happened and what it means, between the broken leg and the unbroken will. Shackleton's crew survived not because their circumstances were favorable. They survived because Shackleton trained an environment of proheresis on that drifting ice floe, a culture in which the choice to continue was never presented as heroic or exceptional, but simply as the next thing to be done. He held talent shows. He assigned mandatory exercise routines. He rationed not just food, but morale with the precision of a pharmacist. He understood intuitively what Epictetus knew philosophically. The will does not maintain itself. It must be exercised daily in small things so that it is available in large ones. Every morning, before you encounter the world, spend 2 minutes in conscious proheresis. Identify one thing today that is outside your control. Name it explicitly. Then identify your chosen response to it. Not the response circumstance is pressuring you toward, but the response your sovereign will select. This is not journaling, it is training. And like all training, it builds capacity that is available when capacity is required most. The impossible begins here. Not with better strategy or bigger networks or more favorable conditions. It begins with the recognition that the most powerful force in your life is not what happens to you. It is what you decide inside your own mind about what happens to you. And that, unlike everything else, has always been entirely yours. Lesson 2. The physics of perception. How the Stoics discovered, 2,000 years early, what neuroscience is only now proving about the constructed nature of reality. In 1995, a psychologist at Cornell University named David Dunning and his graduate student Justin Kruger ran an experiment that became one of the most cited studies in the history of cognitive science. They asked participants to assess their own performance on a range of tasks: logical reasoning, grammatical competence, humor. Then they measured the actual performance. The result was not merely that people were wrong about themselves. The result was structured. The people who performed worst were consistently, systematically, the most confident in their own competence. And the people who performed best consistently underestimated their own performance. This is not a quirk of psychology. This is a feature of human cognition that goes all the way down to the physics of perception. The human brain does not receive information from the world. It constructs information about the world. Every sensory signal that enters your nervous system is processed, filtered, compared against memory, run through emotional priors, and assembled into what feels like raw perception, but is actually a highly edited interpretation. Neuroscientist Anil Seth at the University of Sussex calls this the brain's controlled hallucination of reality. His research team has demonstrated that what we perceive at any given moment is mostly prediction, the brain forecasting what it expects to see based on prior experience, and only secondarily, the correction of that prediction by actual sensory input. The Stoics knew this, not in the language of neuroscience, but with a precision that is philosophically identical. Marcus Aurelius wrote in a passage from the Meditations that is almost never quoted in full, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The word he used in Greek was hypolepsis, which translates not as opinion in the casual sense, but as something closer to the active judgment being applied to this thing right now. Marcus is not saying that pain is imaginary. He is saying that the meaning you assign to the pain, the verdict your mind renders about what the pain implies about your life and your future and your worth, that verdict is not a fact. It is a judgment, and judgments can be changed. The philosopher and neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades studying patients with damage to the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain most associated with rational deliberation. His counterintuitive discovery, published in his landmark book Descartes' Error, was that these patients were not cold, logical machines freed from emotional bias. They were paralyzed. They could not make decisions at all. Because, Damasio found, every judgment the human mind makes is inescapably infused with emotional coloring. The question is never whether your perception is influenced by emotion. The question is whether you are aware of it, whether you are making the influence conscious and available for revision, or whether you are unconsciously mistaking your filtered interpretation for objective reality. This is the core of what the Stoics called fantasia cataleptique, the gripping impression, and their primary practice of working with it was what they called synkatathesis, the deliberate pause before assent. Before you agree with the story, your mind is telling you about what is happening. You pause. Every sensory signal that enters your nervous system is processed, filtered, compared against memory, run through emotional priors, and assembled into what feels like raw perception, but is actually a highly edited interpretation. Neuroscientist Anil Seth at the University of Sussex calls this the brain's controlled hallucination of reality. His research team has demonstrated that what we perceive at any given moment is mostly prediction, the brain forecasting what it expects to see based on prior experience, and only secondarily, the correction of that prediction by actual sensory input. The Stoics knew this, not in the language of neuroscience, but with a precision that is philosophically identical. Marcus Aurelius wrote in a passage from the Meditations that is almost never quoted in full, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The word he used in Greek was hypolepsis, which translates not as opinion in the casual sense, but as something closer to the active judgment being applied to this thing right now. Marcus is not saying that pain is imaginary. He is saying that the meaning you assign to the pain, the verdict your mind renders about what the pain implies about your life and your future and your worth, that verdict is not a fact. It is a judgment, and judgments can be changed. The philosopher and neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades studying patients with damage to the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain most associated with rational deliberation. His counterintuitive discovery, published in his landmark book Descartes' Error, was that these patients were not cold, logical machines freed from emotional bias. They were paralyzed. They could not make decisions at all. Because, Damasio found, every judgment the human mind makes is inescapably infused with emotional coloring. The question is never whether your perception is influenced by emotion. The question is whether you are aware of it, whether you are making the influence conscious and available for revision, or whether you are unconsciously mistaking your filtered interpretation for objective reality. This is the core of what the Stoics called fantasia cataleptique, the gripping impression, and their primary practice of working with it was what they called synkatathesis, the deliberate pause before assent. Before you agree with the story, your mind is telling you about what is happening. You pause. You examine the impression. You ask, is this a fact about the world, or is this a judgment I am producing about the world? Most people never reach the boundary of their actual capability. They reach the boundary of their perceived capability, which is always smaller, always more conservative, always more contaminated by fear and past failure and the accumulated weight of other people's ceilings, and they mistake it for the real one. Roger Bannister ran the first sub-4-minute mile on May 6, 1954. Before that date, the 4-minute mile was widely considered not just unachieved but physiologically impossible, a limit of human biology. Bannister did not have superior lungs or longer legs. He had a different perception. He had trained his mind through what amounted to a Stoic practice of deliberate synkatathesis to refuse the story that the barrier was biological rather than psychological. Within 2 months of his breaking it, John Landy broke it again. Within a year, several runners had. The barrier was never physiological, it was perceptual, the impossible you are facing right now. What percentage of it is a fact about the world, and what percentage of it is a judgment your mind has rendered and then forgotten it rendered? The Stoic practice of interrogating your own perception is not navel-gazing. It is the most direct route to the ceiling, the one that lets you look at it closely enough to see that it isn't stone at all. It is glass. And glass, unlike stone, can be seen through. Lesson 3. The Iron Philosophy of Impermanence. What Marcus Aurelius learned from a river that he applied to an empire, a war, and his own death. Marcus Aurelius was Emperor of Rome for 19 years. He governed at the height of the empire's power and simultaneously during some of its most catastrophic crises. He fought wars on 3 frontiers simultaneously. He managed a pandemic that killed an estimated 5 million people across the empire. He survived multiple attempts to undermine his rule. He watched 4 of his children die before him, and throughout all of it, he returned obsessively to a single idea. Not leadership strategy, not military tactics, not administrative policy. He returned again and again to the idea of impermanence. He wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He wrote, "Time is a river of vanishing moments." He wrote, "All things fade and quickly turn to myth." He wrote about Alexander the Great, Cambyses, Augustus, all of them, once the most powerful men alive, now dust. He wrote these things not as philosophy for public consumption, but as private instruction. Reminders he was writing to himself in a journal he apparently never intended to be read because he needed the reminders. Why would the most powerful man in the known world spend his private contemplative hours meditating on impermanence? Why was this the thought he returned to with more frequency than any other? because he had understood something that takes most people a lifetime to grasp, and some never grasp at all. The primary source of psychological suffering is not circumstance. It is resistance to the impermanence of circumstance, and resistance to impermanence at every scale, from the minor annoyance to the civilizational catastrophe, is the single most reliable way to remain trapped beneath the ceiling of your own potential. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, whom the Stoics deeply admired, wrote, "You cannot step into the same river twice. The river you step into the second time is different water, a different flow, a different temperature. And you are different too, one moment older, carrying one more memory, one more experience. The only constant is the change." The person who grasps this fully does not become passive or fatalistic. They become something far more powerful. They become unstuck. Buddhist philosophy arrived at the same insight through a different path and gave it a different name: anicca, impermanence. Researchers in contemplative neuroscience at Harvard Medical School, led by Dr. Sarah Lazar, have used fMRI imaging to study what happens in the brains of people who deeply internalize impermanence as a lived principle rather than an intellectual concept. They found measurable reduction in activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with rumination, self-referential thought, and the stories we tell about permanence and stability, and corresponding increases in activity in regions associated with present moment awareness and adaptive response. The neuroscience is mapping what Marcus was doing by hand in his journal at midnight by lamplight. But the practical application for achieving the impossible is even more direct than the philosophy. Most people are imprisoned not by their current circumstances, but by their past interpretation of past circumstances. The failure that happened 3 years ago is not happening now, but if you have not fully metabolized its impermanence, it is still shaping your behavior today as though it were a permanent fact about you. The relationship that ended, the business that collapsed, the moment of public humiliation. These are not facts about your permanent nature. They are events that occurred in a river that has long since moved on. Marcus practiced what we might call deliberate impermanence, the active daily meditation on the fact that everything he was experiencing, good and bad, was already in the process of becoming something else. His greatest victories, his deepest grief, the love of his children, the weight of empire, all of it passing. And rather than producing despair, this recognition produced in him what he called equanimity. Not the cold detachment of someone who doesn't care, but the stable, unrockable presence of someone who is not surprised by change because they have made peace with its constancy. When you encounter an obstacle or a failure or a loss, say, not as a spiritual bypass but as a factual observation, this too is impermanent. Then ask, when this has passed, what will I wish I had done with it? This is not positive thinking, it is temporal accuracy. The situation is already changing. The only question is whether you are moving with it. Lesson 4. The discipline of desire. Why the Stoics said that wanting the wrong things is more dangerous than having nothing. In 2009, a Harvard professor of psychology named Daniel Gilbert published research that upended a foundational assumption of modern achievement culture. Gilbert had spent years studying what he called affective forecasting, the human ability to predict how future events will make us feel. His methodology was elegant. He asked people to predict how happy or unhappy they would be after various outcomes, then followed up to measure how they actually felt. The results were consistent and startling. Human beings are systematically wrong about what will make them happy, and they are wrong in a specific, predictable direction. They consistently overestimate the emotional impact of both positive and negative events. The promotion they thought would change everything. 3 months later, roughly the same level of satisfaction. The failure, they were sure, would devastate them. 3 months later, roughly the same level of well-being. Gilbert called the mechanism behind this psychological immune system the extraordinary capacity of the human mind to adapt to, rationalize, and ultimately neutralize the emotional impact of outcomes, both good and bad. The Stoics had a name for what Gilbert was measuring the failure of. They called it epithymia, disordered desire. The attachment to outcomes as though those outcomes, once achieved or avoided, would permanently determine the quality of your inner life. Epictetus was radical about this. He said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." Marcus Aurelius echoed him. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. But here is the subtlety that most readings of the Stoics miss, and that makes this lesson so much more powerful than it first appears. The Stoics were not anti-ambition. They were not passive. Marcus fought wars. Seneca built enormous wealth. Cato gave his life for his principles. The Stoic position was not that goals are meaningless. It was that goals pursued from a place of disordered desire, from the anxious conviction that attaining them is a prerequisite for an inner peace you cannot otherwise access, fundamentally corrupt both the pursuit and the person doing the pursuing. When you need the outcome, when your inner stability is contingent on the external result, you become psychologically brittle in a way that directly undermines your performance. Every obstacle feels existential. Every setback triggers a catastrophic narrative about your worth and your future. The prefrontal cortex, flooded with cortisol from the threat response, loses access to the creative, flexible, high-order thinking that is the actual mechanism of all extraordinary achievement. The neurologist Martin Paulus at the University of California, San Diego, has spent years studying elite military performance under pressure. His team's most consistent finding: the operatives who perform best under extreme stress are not the ones with the most intense desire to succeed. They are the ones who have the deepest equanimity about failure, not because they don't care, but because they have separated their identity from the outcome with enough precision that the threat response does not contaminate their executive function. This is the Stoic discipline of desire made operational. You pursue the goal with full intensity of effort and zero attachment to the result. You give everything to the process and release the outcome, not because you've given up on winning, but because you have discovered, as the Stoics discovered, that this is actually the posture from which you win most reliably. The ancient Stoics distinguished between preferred indifference, things worth pursuing but not worth your inner peace, and the only genuine good, which they called virtue, the quality of mind brought to every action, irrespective of the external result. The archer draws the bow with perfect form and releases the arrow. Whether the wind shifts after release is not the archer's domain. The archer's domain is the draw, the breath, the release. That domain, mastered completely, produces the best possible results. And if the arrow still misses, the archer remains whole, because nothing fundamental was staked on the landing. What are you pursuing right now that you have secretly decided is the precondition for your peace of mind? Name it. Then ask, what would it look like to pursue this with everything you have while releasing your inner life from its result? That posture, not the goal itself, is the beginning of impossible achievement. Lesson 5. The weight of the present moment. Why Seneca said that most people are never alive, and how to become the exception. Seneca, in one of the most startling openings of any philosophical letter ever written, addressed his friend Lucilius with these words: Ita fac me Lucili, vindica te tibi, claim yourself for yourself. Then he explained, the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. This was not a metaphor. Seneca had spent significant portions of his life in exile, under the threat of imperial execution, navigating the lethal politics of Caligula and then Nero's Rome. He understood, with the acuity of a man who had watched multiple friends and colleagues die at the emperor's whim, that the future was not merely uncertain. It was, in a fundamental sense, not yet real, and the past was no longer real. The only thing that was real, the only ground where any action was possible, any quality of mind could be expressed, any progress toward the impossible could occur, was now. The psychological research on time perception and well-being is unambiguous and extensive. Psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert of Harvard, in a landmark study that tracked over 15,000 people across 80 countries using real-time smartphone experience sampling, found that the human mind spends approximately 47% of its waking hours not engaged with what it is actually doing. It is somewhere else, planning, worrying, remembering, fantasizing. And every moment the mind is not in the present, happiness decreases, regardless of what the mind is thinking about. Mind wandering toward pleasant fantasies was still associated with lower well-being than full engagement with even mundane activities. The Stoics would have found this finding entirely unsurprising. They had a concept for the quality of full present engagement, prosos, attention, watchfulness, the practice of directing the full weight of consciousness onto the present moment and the action occurring within it. For the Stoics, prosos was not a relaxation technique. It was a performance tool, a philosophical weapon, the means by which the gap between intention and execution could be closed. Consider what happens to exceptional performance when the mind is fully present. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the Hungarian psychologist who spent decades studying peak performance, identified what he called flow, the state of optimal experience in which the mind is fully absorbed in a challenging activity. In flow, self-consciousness disappears, time distorts, the quality of work rises dramatically. And almost every practitioner who has described the experience, from chess grandmasters to surgeons to athletes to composers, has described it in terms that sound remarkably like what Seneca was prescribing: the complete inhabiting of the present moment, with nothing held in reserve for worry about the past or anxiety about the future. Seneca wrote, "Nusquam est qui ubique est." He who is everywhere is nowhere. This is the person who is always partially attending. One eye on the task, one eye on the performance review, one ear on the conversation, one ear on the internal narration about whether they're doing it right. Never fully in the room, never fully in the work, and therefore never accessing the full depth of their capability, because that depth only opens when the present moment is treated not as a means to something else, but as the only place anything real ever occurs. Seneca's practice was temporal accounting, what he called balancing life's books each day. Before sleep, he would review the day not for productivity, but for presence. Where was I fully alive? Where was I absent? Where did I let tomorrow steal from today? This practice, sustained over time, is not philosophy. It is training in one of the rarest and most powerful capabilities a human being can develop: the ability to be exactly where you are. The impossible requires this, not because inspiration strikes in the present moment, though it often does, but because the impossible is built one present moment action at a time, and the person who is only partially here is only partially building. The person who is fully here, who has claimed themselves for themselves, as Seneca put it, is building at 100% of their capacity every moment they are in the work. And over time, that difference is not incremental, it is transformative. Lesson 6. The forge of voluntary suffering, the disturbing Stoic practice that modern neuroscience has now proven was correct. There is a moment in Seneca's letters that stops most modern readers cold. He writes to Lucilius, a wealthy, comfortable Roman official, and issues this instruction. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" Seneca was not writing this from poverty. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He owned vineyards, multiple properties, fine clothes. He dined with emperors. And yet, deliberately, several days each month, he chose to live as though he had nothing. Cold food, hard bed, rough clothes, not as penance, not as performance, as training. He called this the practice of asketikos, voluntary austerity, and his purpose was precise. He wanted to know, at the level of lived physical experience, that deprivation could not break him, that the worst imaginable loss of comfort was survivable, that the thing he feared most about failure was, when actually encountered, manageable. Because a man who has voluntarily slept on a hard floor and been fine has a fundamentally different relationship to the fear of poverty than a man who has only imagined it. Modern neuroscience has mapped this phenomenon with extraordinary precision. Dr. Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania, the founder of positive psychology, developed what he called learned helplessness to describe what happens to an organism repeatedly exposed to aversive conditions it cannot control. The organism stops trying even when control becomes available. It has learned to be helpless. But Seligman's later research, less frequently cited, identified the precise inverse. Organisms that are repeatedly exposed to aversive conditions they successfully endure develop what he called learned mastery, an operational confidence in their own resilience that is neurologically encoded and available in future high-stress situations. Navy SEALs training includes a phase called Hell Week, 130 hours of continuous cold water immersion, sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, and relentless psychological pressure. The dropout rate exceeds 70%. But the candidates who complete it report not just physical improvement, but a permanent cognitive restructuring. The relationship between their nervous system and the concept of too hard is fundamentally altered. What registered as an emergency signal before Hell Week registers afterward as information. Difficult becomes data. Misery becomes manageable. The impossible begins to look like merely the very, very hard. Seneca understood this intuitively. He understood that the fear of hardship is always larger than the hardship itself, that the imagination of suffering has a gravitational pull that distorts the assessment of what is actually required. And he understood that the only way to correct this distortion was to encounter the feared thing voluntarily, in controlled doses, before it arrived involuntarily in full measure. The Stoic concept here is not masochism, it is inoculation. The body's immune system works by exposing itself to controlled doses of pathogens in order to build the capacity to respond to full infection. Seneca was applying the same logic to the psychological immune system. Expose yourself to voluntary hardship in controlled doses so that when involuntary hardship arrives, and it will always arrive, your system is not encountering the stimulus for the first time. It has been here before. It knows the way through. Friedrich Nietzsche, deeply influenced by the Stoics, wrote, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." This has become one of the most trivialized statements in the history of philosophy, but Nietzsche meant something specific and technical. Adversity, when metabolized through a trained mind, does not merely leave you intact, it rewires you. It builds neural pathways of resilience, cognitive flexibility, and tolerant exposure that are not available to those who have only encountered comfort. Choose one form of voluntary difficulty this week that you have been avoiding because it is uncomfortable. Not dangerous, but genuinely uncomfortable. A cold shower, a hard conversation you've been postponing, an early morning when your default is sleep, a day of deliberate simplicity. Then pay attention not to the discomfort itself, but to what the discomfort reveals about your relationship to discomfort. The impossible is not unlocked by eliminating difficulty. It is unlocked by discovering, through repeated direct experience, that difficulty does not have the authority over you, that you have been granting it. Lesson 7. Amor fati. The most demanding idea in the history of philosophy and the most liberating one. In 1940, a man named Witold Pilecki volunteered to be arrested by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz. He was not Jewish. He was not being deported. He was a Polish cavalry officer and intelligence operative who had concluded, after analyzing the available information about what was happening inside the new camp, that someone needed to get in, document the atrocities, organize the prisoners, and get the information out. He forged a prisoner identity and allowed himself to be taken in a street roundup. He spent 2.5 years inside Auschwitz. He organized a prisoner resistance network. He sent encoded intelligence reports out through couriers. He documented systematic murder when the world still had no evidence of it. He watched thousands of people die. He survived typhus, beatings, and multiple close encounters with selection for the gas chambers. After the war, he was asked what had kept him alive inside Auschwitz, not just physically, but psychologically. What had kept the human machinery of his mind functioning when everything around him was designed to annihilate it. He said, in effect, "I decided it was happening for a reason." Not that the Holocaust had a reason. He was entirely clear-eyed about what it was, but that his presence inside it had a purpose. That the specific combination of himself, in this place at this moment, was not accidental, and that this meant something was being asked of him that only he could provide. This is amor fati, love of fate. And it is the most demanding, most misunderstood, and most liberating concept in the entire history of Stoic philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche, who is often credited with the phrase but drew directly on Stoic foundations, described it as his formula for human greatness, not merely bearing what is necessary, not concealing it, not tolerating it, but loving it, demanding meaning from it, entering into it so completely that the distinction between what you chose and what was given to you begins to dissolve. This sounds, the first time you encounter it, like a counsel of madness. Love your worst experiences. Love the circumstances that are destroying your plans and threatening your future. But here is the mechanism, and the mechanism is everything. The psychological research on post-traumatic growth, led for 30 years by Richard Tedeschi at the University of North Carolina, has found that approximately 65% of trauma survivors eventually report positive psychological change as a result of their worst experiences. Greater depth of relationship, expanded sense of personal possibility, spiritual deepening, appreciation for life that was not available before the trauma. The differentiating factor between the people who experience post-traumatic growth and those who experience post-traumatic stress is not the severity of the trauma. It is the presence or absence of meaning-making, the degree to which the person consciously, actively constructs significance from what has happened. Amor fati is not passive resignation. It is active meaning-making at the highest level. It is the refusal to allow circumstances to be merely things that happened to you, and the insistence that they be raw material for becoming something you could not have become any other way. Seneca wrote, "Per aspera ad astra." Through difficulty to the stars. He did not mean that difficulty is good. He meant that difficulty, properly received, metabolized through a trained mind rather than resisted by a frightened one, is the specific material from which impossible things are made. Pilecki was eventually captured after the war, not by the Nazis, but by the Stalinist Polish government, who saw his Western intelligence connections as a threat. He was tortured and executed in 1948. But before he died, his interrogators reportedly remarked that they could not break him. He showed no bitterness, no collapse. He had already practiced in Auschwitz and in everything that came after, the love of the life he had been given. And in that love, nothing, no torture, no execution, no injustice, could take from him the person he had built. The impossible begins where resignation ends and amor fati begins. The moment you stop negotiating with your circumstances and start demanding that they make you extraordinary. Lesson 8. The Architecture of Virtue. Why the Stoics said, "Character is not a spiritual goal, but the only functional technology for achieving anything that lasts." There is a word in Greek that the Stoics used as the cornerstone of their entire philosophy. The word is arete. It is usually translated as virtue. And that translation in modern English is unfortunately loaded with connotations of moral primness and religious piety that are almost the exact opposite of what the Stoics meant. The Greek arete comes from the root ari, to fit. Arete, in its original meaning, is the quality of being excellently suited to your purpose. A knife with arete is an exceptionally sharp knife. A horse with arete is a horse in full athletic expression of its capacity. A human being with arete is a human being functioning at the maximum expression of their rational, social, and purposive nature. The Stoics identified 4 specific forms of arete, which they called the cardinal virtues. Sophia, wisdom, the quality of accurate perception and sound judgment. Andrea, courage, the willingness to act despite fear and uncertainty. Dikaiosune, justice, the commitment to the good of the whole rather than just the self. And Sophrosine, temperance, the discipline to regulate impulse and maintain proportion. And then they made a claim that was, in the context of ancient philosophy, genuinely revolutionary, and that modern performance psychology is only now catching up with. These 4 qualities of character are not morally valuable because some god demands them. They are functionally necessary because without them, no sustained achievement of any kind is possible. Consider what happens to performance in the absence of each. Without wisdom, without the capacity for accurate perception and sound judgment, you pursue the wrong goals with tremendous efficiency and arrive exactly where you intended to go, which is nowhere near where you should be. Without courage, without the ability to act despite uncertainty and social resistance, every genuinely new idea you have dies in the planning stage. Without justice, without a genuine commitment to something larger than your own immediate interest, your motivation is fragile, because self-interest alone is never a sufficient fuel source for long-duration achievement. And without temperance, without the discipline to regulate impulse and resist the pull of immediate gratification, you are perpetually at the mercy of your own nervous system. Jim Collins, who spent 5 years studying what separates companies that make the leap to sustained greatness from those that don't, published his findings in the book Good to Great. His most counterintuitive discovery was about leadership. He expected the highest performing companies to be led by bold, charismatic visionaries. What he found instead were what he called level 5 leaders, characterized not by ego and force of personality, but by a paradoxical combination of fierce professional resolve and genuine personal humility. They were, he noted, the least self-promotional of any leaders he had studied, the most committed to something beyond themselves, the most honest about their own limitations and the limitations of their organizations. Collins didn't know he was describing arete, but he was describing it precisely, the functional performance advantage of character that the Stoics had identified 2,000 years before his research. The Stoics practiced a daily character audit they called exam, a nightly review attributed by Seneca to the Pythagorean tradition, but fully integrated into Stoic practice. What bad habit did I put right today? In what way am I better? Were my actions just? Were they courageous? Were they wise? Did I maintain proportion? Not as moral self-flagellation, but as performance review, as the daily calibration of the instrument being the mind, that must function precisely for any impossible goal to be reached. At the end of each day, ask yourself 4 questions. Where did I use good judgment today? Where did I act despite difficulty? Where did I serve something larger than my own comfort? Where did I maintain discipline when impulse pulled otherwise? These are not spiritual questions. They are technical ones. The answers tell you exactly where the instrument needs work, and the instrument, maintained through daily calibration, eventually becomes capable of things that seemed, before the practice, entirely impossible. These are not 10 lessons for 10 types of people. They are 10 dimensions of a single mind, the mind that the Stoics spent 6 centuries developing, and that the most extraordinary human beings across history and across every domain of endeavor have arrived at independently, through the hard experience of refusing to accept the impossible as a fact. The ceiling you are standing beneath right now is not made of stone. The Stoics knew this. History has confirmed it over and over. In the most extreme and verifiable conditions human beings have ever endured. Claim yourself for yourself. Begin the work. The impossible is not ahead of you. It is waiting inside the mind you are building, one deliberate day at a time.